And we're back. If you remember, we left off. I had landed my rover-lander combo here on Vall, and we were headed towards this anomaly, which you can now see is the Stonehenge-type thingy Easter egg. Pretty cool and mysterious little Easter egg here on Vall. You'll see when I take off, I'm going to do my little flag thing here, where the Easter egg is. If you're curious if that's one of the things you're trying to figure out is how to find this Easter egg, you can see when I take off where I'm at. Get all my Kerbals, let them stretch their legs here, get them all out. Right now I'm actually trying to figure out what the mission profile is still not defined. Basically just do as much as you can with the fuel you have. So they're on Vall, they found this Easter egg, and now they need to take this lander back to the space train. The problem is, I now realize, even though those two cans on the side do have fuel left, you can see the middle section of the lander has no electrical generation, so it will run out of power eventually. So I burn off those fuel cans, I drop them, and now I'm running on battery power and that top fuel cell. So my plan is, since the electricity will keep burning no matter what, because the systems are running in the can, that I just need to get orbit and get as close to the space train as I can with the fuel. Because I would have been able to make my encounter and dock with that amount of fuel, but since the electricity was like a timer, I only had about 3 minutes to make orbit and get my encounter. Now I got really close to the space train, but the train is going to have to do the last bit of work here to get the encounter. And I now realize that I'm not going to try and dock with the ship, even though there are junior docking ports up near the top. It's just going to be too hard to position the train to dock with that tiny little lander can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the Kerbals over instead. All I have to do is get an encounter, basically. So instead of doing one dock, I get to do 3 docks, because I got to dock each Kerbal on the ship here at the door so he can get into the crew container. I realize now, in hindsight, this mission, I moved the Kerbals around in space an awful lot, because the mission profile wasn't defined, so the ship was just kind of equipped generically so that it could handle lots of different things, and then I would figure out what I would do with it when I got there. And now the lander is pretty much useless because it's out of fuel, I'm not docking it, and even if I did dock it, it would just recharge the battery. It wouldn't be very useful because I couldn't land it again. I left the wheels down on the surface of Vall. So the lander can is going to be, you can see it in the background here behind the ship drift past when I bring the last Kerbal over, because the encounter, as you can see, they're not docking, they're moving relative to each other. I like this face, it's pretty cool. So I just moved all the Kerbals over while they were near each other. They're not actually going to hit each other, they're just getting close to each other. But anyways, yeah, that can is useless. So now I need to figure out what I can do with what I've got left. And what I have left is the train, the orange fuel cell in the middle, which is about, yeah, say goodbye to the lander can. It's left to orbit Vall for eternity. I've got the orange fuel cell, and then I've got the tug on the bottom, which is basically all of my utility. The power generation is on the tug, and that's where the probe core is. So if I ever leave the train, only the tug can control things, and it's the only thing with electrical generation. So I've decided that I'm going to use the tug and land on Bop, because the gravity is so light on Bop that I think that shouldn't be a problem. I'll just do a very gentle landing, because I've equipped the tug with some of the basic landing gear. Not really expecting to ever use it as a lander, just sort of accessory to throw it on there. I wanted it to look like it was a worker. And also the landing gear, they don't know. They're just, there's not much in Kerbal as far as parts and stuff, so when you want to do things, I figured the landing gear might be useful if I wanted to land on a moon like Bop or Pole, just because I knew the gravity was so weak. So I guess I did kind of expect it to be used as a lander, but more of like total long shot. I never expected to have this much fuel and be able to do 2 trips to 2 different moons. Alright, so I'm getting my Bop encounter here. Or I have my Bop encounter and I'm capturing. I'm doing my capture burn. There's my orbit. It's a pretty good orbit, because what I want to try and do is hit the North Pole. I'm going to go get one more Easter egg. My plan here is, since the Laythe base was destroyed by the Kraken, I'm going to go get my revenge on Bop here. So I'm going to move 2 Kerbals down to the tug. I'm only using 2 for symmetry, and I need to leave 1 on the train. Since the train has no probe core, the tug is the only one with the probe core. Once I move the tug like this, the train would be useless without a Kerbal in. Even though there's no power generation, the batteries will probably last the time I'm gone, because I think it's got about 150 And I'm going to just do a quick trip to the surface here and then back up to the train. It'll only do 1 orbit, which probably is enough. Even still, the tug is what will do the dock anyway, so it has the power. I've basically done this entire mission, I think there's about 4 solar panels on the tug, and that's what's powered everything this entire time. It's pretty awesome. So I'm just kind of drifting over the surface. I know it's somewhere near the North Pole, so I've got my landing pretty close to the North Pole, and I'm trying to find it. I think I see it. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to try and maneuver the lander I'm calling it the lander now. Yeah, I guess it is a lander, the tug lander, towards the Kraken, and now I am really close. You can see I'm moving my lander right over top of him. That little blip there to the left on the ground, the pixels turning white. It's the nice thing about Kerbal is since the textures are pretty boring, the Easter eggs stand out really well when the sun is on them. The pixels reflect really well. So I have to be very, 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 very gentle. I can't damage this. This is basically my entire ship. Because even though it's just the tug, all of the utility is on the tug. All of the RCS, power generation, and it provides leverage so that the ship can move transitionally. Without those RCS ports on the tug, the ship wouldn't move transitionally. It would like pivot when I tried to create a transitional movement. So yeah, just it's not hard to get a gentle landing on Bop. I think the gravity is practically non-existent. I mean, I'm floating almost. Like if you see, I'm not even throttling right now. I have like tiny little spurts of throttle, just tiny little spurts. I don't even know if it's even using that much fuel, maybe like a couple liters, just to like position closer so I don't have to walk as far. Get my revenge on this Kraken for destroying my beautiful single stage to orbit rover. I've had to make that VTOL single stage to orbit do so much work because the other one got destroyed by this freaking Kraken. Alright, let's go have our fun. I think this is Charlie and Orfel, maybe? I can't remember which Kerbals these are. I know the mission was Devle, Charlie, and Orfel, but I move them around a lot. I can't remember which ones stay where and who went down to the surface. I did know, but it's been a while since I shot this part, and I kind of forgot. Sorry. I'm sure you can see on the screen. You're like, oh, it's Charlie, obviously. Charlie's gonna go jump around on the Kraken here. He says he looks dead, but he's caused an awful lot of damage. So, all right, we're gonna defeat him here, plant our flag in him. Ha ha ha. Or next to him, I guess, not really in him. I could have jumped on him and put it in him, but I feel like when they change textures and stuff, Easter eggs may get moved or adjusted, so it's better to put it on the ground maybe. Either way, it doesn't matter. This is in career mode, so nothing's permanent. Just enjoying Bop's gravity. They've been in space for a while now, having been on Vall, and then now I'm back to Bop. Right back to the lander tug, multifunctional tug, I should call it. I think I may get Orfel off too, just to let him stretch his legs a bit. Don't want him to feel a little cramped. I mean, plus he's been sitting there staring at the ground this whole time. It just seems rude to not let him also jump around a bit and enjoy the weak gravity. I'm not gonna lie, Bop is one of the funnest places in Kerbin. Up there with Gilly and Pole. I think Pole is probably the best, but it's hard to land on Pole. Not hard, but as hard as Bop, and less of an incentive to go there because there's no Easter egg. I guess I'll go there next now, but just because at some point I'm gonna have to start visiting all the places I haven't been. But I do feel like this mission has succeeded. It's visited all of the Easter eggs in the Jool system. So I feel like mission accomplished. Lad planted 2 flags, and now it's time to return home to Laythe. I figured that I'll use up the rest of that orange container, getting back to Laythe, and then whatever's left in it I can dump in the shuttle that's going to land back to the surface. Because I do remember I didn't top off the liquid tanks, I only topped off the oxidized tanks. Because those are the ones that really matter, since that's what you need for space maneuvering. But I want to put all the liquid fuel in there, and then I can use that tank to basically delete some oxidizer. So the tug is super maneuverable. I mean, it's a tug. It's designed to push and move things around in space really easily, so it's very easy to dock this. This was probably the easiest dock of the whole mission. Actually, there is one thing I'd like to say, though. These big docking ports I do find are more difficult to dock, only because they seem to have less ability to make tiny corrections. These smaller docking pots are more likely to snap with some I want to say some forgiveness. These ones have much less forgiveness. You have to be much more precise with these, but I do also think that you're gaining strength with that, maybe. I don't know. I tried using docking mode. I don't ever use it. I normally just dock in staging mode, and you can see I'm already back into staging mode, just because you have more control in staging mode. Docking mode gives you the transitional movement, but you lose the rotational movement. So I like staging mode because you have both, right? You have WASD for your rotational and IJKL for your transitional. It's perfect. It's the best for docking. Staging is the best for docking. I'm sure most people do it that way, because the docking mode takes away half of your controls. It kind of sucks. Just positioning it in here, no problemo. Quick little, get the tug snapped back to the train so she doesn't run out of power. Want to make sure all electricity is topped off. And now we're gonna make sure that the tug is all, the thing too with the tug is that we always want to make sure that is all the possible fuel that we can put in it is in it. Because it's the thing that is the most, it does the most moving around, right? So, alright, so we're going to take the Kerbals off the tug, obviously, because they're just sitting out there in space, and we'll get them back in their little home, their nice little home they've been staying in here for a while now, and prepare for their trip back to Laythe. They're going to rendezvous with their VTOL single stage to orbit so that they can get back to base. And the tug is going to have a fair amount of fuel based on my calculations at this point, because the orange tank still isn't empty. I've got like 500 liters maybe, I can't remember, but I do know that I don't empty the orange tank here until I rendezvous. Oh, another problem. Okay, so the single stage VTOL doesn't have a probe core. So instead of docking the train to the shuttle, I'm going to move a Kerbal over to the shuttle because the shuttle is highly mobile. The RCS ports on this thing are designed pretty much perfectly. So I'm going to use it to dock, obviously. It's way easier to dock this to the train than to dock the train to this. That, and I want to keep it from drifting. I want to have control of it. I forgot to turn on the SAS when I got all the Kerbals out. So the best thing I could do was get a Kerbal back in and then just use it to dock. So I'm just going to do a quick dock here to the train. I'm not going to lie, this probably wasn't my most efficient dock. I think I was either distracted or I don't know, something happened here, because it takes me an awful long time to dock this. I don't remember. I can't remember what I was doing at this time, but I don't think Kerbal had 100% of my focus. So I was going very slowly. But it looks like, I can't really tell in the previewer because it's so small. Orfel maybe? Is that Orfel or Charlie? No, it's not Charlie. I'd say it's Orfel or Devray. Devray. I keep adding a V where there's a Durley. Derley, I think is his name. Those are my three. I think that's Orfel if I had to guess, just based on the shape of the name. I think Orfel here is docking the shuttle. And then we're gonna bring over the other two Kerbals and transfer over all the fuel. You would say, why even dock it, right? Because I can make it back to Laythe. All I had to do is transfer over the other two Kerbals. Well, you docked because it's easier to move your guys over when the ships are attached and to transfer the fuel, obviously. Because I basically want to get rid of that orange tank. I don't want it anymore. The train will be left with that full silver tank, or almost full, that full half orange silver tank. And then the two auxiliary tanks there, and then the tug has a tank on it. So the train actually has enough fuel to make it back to Kerbin. That is actually kind of awesome. So I've decided that I'm going to leave the train in orbit around Laythe. And since the shuttle obviously can take it off from the surface and return to orbit, the Kerbins basically on the Laythe base now have a legitimate way to get home at their own disposal. They don't need any help from Kerbin Space Center. Between the Laythe single stage to orbit VTOL shuttle here and the train, they could send 5 Kerbals home. Alright, so we're going to slowly burn away from the train to get our capture into the Laythe atmosphere. I overshoot the base here. You can see I'm flying over base right now. So I'm going to do a reverse entry and use the engines to increase my deceleration. The trick to flying after coming in hot like that is, without spinning out of control, is to burn up. Because you need to kill your vertical before you try to engage horizontal velocity. Because you're falling, right? So the wings don't like to fall. So if you look, I'm using the smoke to see when I've stopped falling. I'm trying to keep the ship pointed up. It's very hard. I'm going to look back here and I'm going to notice the smoke is pretty much leveled off now. So now I know I can tip forward and start flying. Once I've stopped falling, the wings will now work normally, like they're supposed to, instead of like parachutes when you're falling. Because when you're falling, they're like parachutes and they want to make you tip. Alright, so the base is just over the ridge there. You can see it right there on the left. And it's the lights and the... But I can't actually land at the base and fraps it. I only get like 2 frames per second, and it's just too hard, and I kept crashing. So I land just down here, and then what I'll do is I'll just move it over without frapsing. But yeah, back on the surface. Mission success.